25 years after the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child came into existence, what are the battles ahead? What do MEPs want to do to improve conditions for children in Europe? We asked Roberta Metsola, an MEP and lawyer from Malta, who's creating right now a parliamentary intergroup on children's rights.
Okay, so our first question comes from UNICEF. Let's listen to that.
Suite au traité de Lisbonne, nous aimerions que l'Union européenne adhère à la Convention sur les droits de l'enfant. Pourriez-vous faire, durant votre législature, en sorte que l'Union européenne adhère à la Convention sur les droits de l'enfant?
Alors, what do you answer to him?
Well, the resolution that we are seeking to adopt this week in plenary asks also for this, that the European Union accedes to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. We will obviously have to see the technicalities of how this will be done. However, the political will is there, and I am confident that at least we can get agreement between all the political groups to achieve this aim.
So now we asked some children to give their opinion on what should be next battles from the European Union on children. So, our first child.
Je me demandais si aujourd'hui, ce que l'on pouvait faire pour que les enfants puissent tous aller à l'école dans tout le monde.
Is that a problem? Education?
Absolutely, absolutely. Why? Because there are still too many countries, not only outside the European Union, where access to education is not granted to everybody. And this is what we, as a European Parliament, have been saying for a long time, that one of our primary aims is to make sure that all children have access to at least basic education. We are still very, very far away from that.
If we add other examples on what should be really your main priorities on children, battles in the next years, what would you mention? For instance, did the crisis create problems also for minors in Europe?
Well, first of all, let's start from a structural point of view. In the European Parliament, we are creating an intergroup for children's rights. Unfortunately, there is no committee that deals with children's rights, and we are a group of members of the European Parliament that have decided to pool our resources together, dedicate our time to see where the problems are. And we have a lot of children that are victims of violence. We have a lot of children that are victims of racial profiling. We have a lot of children that are, because of the crisis that you mentioned, have fallen outside the priorities of governments. We have to make sure that with children there is no compromise. Politicians have to make sure that they place policies in favour of access and inclusion for all children at all levels in, or at least as a priority, in their political plans for the future.
Good, let's listen to the next child.
Qu'est-ce qu'on pourrait faire pour aider les enfants qui ont subi une maltraitance, et qu'est-ce qu'on pourrait faire pour aider les enfants qui ont subi une catastrophe naturelle?
Alors, these are two different things, but
yes.
First, violence.
We have legislation that we have adopted against sexual exploitation, child pornography, all sorts of physical and moral violence. Unfortunately, not all member states have implemented that piece of legislation. So we are also calling that, first of all, you have to make sure that the basic rules that you have agreed at on a political level, at the European Union level, that you implement and make sure the structures in the schools, in the local authorities are well equipped from counselling point of view, also the police, also teachers being trained, facilitators if you have children with a disability that are more vulnerable than children that don't have a disability, that everything is in place to protect them. Unfortunately, we're very far away. On natural catastrophes, yes, this is something that I think the European Union wakes up always a little bit too late. Why? Because we wait for a natural catastrophe to happen before we kickstart any crisis mechanism. If children end up without somebody to protect them, then they are very, very vulnerable. They are more vulnerable than adults.
We have our last question, so let's listen to this lady.
Bonjour. Comment faire en sorte que les enfants en migration soient vus comme des enfants d'abord et puis seulement en tant que migrants? Merci.
Well, first of all, what we have said, both in Malta and within the Civil Liberties Committee in the European Parliament, of which I am a member, is that we should never detain children. Unfortunately, there are governments who, when minors, whether they are accompanied or unaccompanied, arrive at our shores, I'm talking about Malta, there have been cases when they have been treated like adults. They have been put in detention pending a decision being taken on whether they are eligible or not for protection. What has happened is that because they are more vulnerable than adults, they have sometimes been found themselves being abused or discriminated against. There is a lot of legislation that we have accepted, we have adopted. Everybody says that they are good pieces of legislation, but then member state governments tend to forget them. What we are saying is minors are more vulnerable than adults. Let's give them the protection they need.
Merci. Thank you very much.
Merci à vous.